When you hear about the homeless in San Francisco, you're probably reminded of shanty towns made up of tents, fights under bridges, and locals and visitors harassed by loud and violent addicts high on whatever was totally not given to them by the CIA. However, don't be fooled by such appearances, for as you hopscotch past all of the used needles on the busy streets, you may just be in the presence of royalty. Many emperors and kings of old would disguise themselves to go out and mingle with the common folk. But today's mad lad was kind of the opposite. A man with absolutely nothing to his name but a whole city that waited on his every command. A man who spent his days out on the streets, but by the grace of God, those streets were his. The best kind of crazy homeless people are the funny ones. Norton the First, King of the Hobos, Emperor of the United States, and Protector of Mexico. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. But before we get started, we have a new sponsor. This video was brought to you by Aura. Have you ever looked yourself up and saw some very personal information about you online? Whether you have or haven't, there is likely something out there that you would rather keep private. Data brokers are making a fortune selling your metadata to robocallers, spammers, and other third-party companies that want to make money using your information, such as where you live, all the way down to your preferences on pretty much anything, which is why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor. Aura can identify data brokers exposing your information and will submit an opt-out request on your behalf. Data brokers are legally required to remove your private information when you ask them, but they won't make it easy for you. So Aura can handle all of that on your behalf. Aura has some great features, including fast notifications and alerts so you are always informed, parental controls to keep your kids safe, and also keep an eye on the content that they are viewing. Use the link on screen or down below in the description to get a 14-day trial of Aura so you can see for yourself how secure you really are online and gain some relief in knowing that Aura has your back. Aura also does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats that you can't see. It's really easy to set up, so you don't have to download several different apps to get things like parental controls, antivirus, VPN, password management, identity theft insurance, and more. You get everything at one affordable price. Nobody wants big corporations profiting off of their information, which is why Aura is great for anyone that wants to stay in control of their data and information. So show them some love and click the link. Joshua Abraham Norton was probably born on the 4th of February 1818 to Jewish parents in Deptford, England, before moving with his family to South Africa at the age of 2. It's actually thanks to this move that we have a decent idea of when Norton was actually born, because his exact date of birth isn't certain. The ship records from his emigration provided the most likely year that he was born. As Norton came of age in Cape Town, his father's business career took a turn for the worse, and the young Norton eventually left South Africa for Boston in 1845. Over the next 3 years, Norton came into possession of £40,000, which was a lot of money back then. Sources vary on how Norton got this money. Some say that it was all an inheritance, others say that only part of it was an inheritance, and there's also speculation that he stopped for a while in Rio de Janeiro to do some business and build a nest egg on his way to his ultimate destination, San Francisco. In November, Norton arrived in San Francisco during the gold rush in November of 1849. However, he was far too much of a merchant for mining, so instead of picking up a pickaxe, he established Joshua Norton and Company, and he invested in real estate and import brokering. Norton quickly proved himself to be a very smart businessman as he managed to multiply the capital he brought with him quite handsomely into a $250,000 fortune, which bought him his place in the city's high society, though just for a while. In December of 1852, a big rice shortage hit San Francisco because China had banned exports due to a famine. Because China. But while everyone else was hungrily suffering the loss of their favourite takeaways, Norton smelled profit. A great opportunity had cropped up thanks to this shortage because the price of rice had risen from 4 cents per pound to 36 cents per pound. So Norton aped into rice and managed to bag an absolute bargain by putting a $2,000 deposit on the entire stock of a Peruvian ship in order to corner the market at 12.5 cents per pound at a total cost of $25,000 for 200,000 pounds of rice. Norton watched with dollar signs in his eyes as the ship laden with his fortune arrived at the port. And another ship, and another ship. Norton quickly realised that he wasn't the only person to have this idea, so he hadn't actually cornered the market, and his investment evaporated to a value of just 3 cents per pound. Despite not having been in the country for very long, Norton got right into the American spirit to solve the problem. He sued his rice guy. He sued his rice dealer to try and void the contract on the basis that he had been misled about the number of ships coming in, and therefore the value of the cargo that he had bought. This led to a 2-year legal battle that went all the way to the California Supreme Court, though Norton would have wished it hadn't gone that far. While the lower courts were on Norton's side, he ended up losing on appeal, and the litigation had cost him the last of his fortune. He was ruined. Reduced to living in a boarding house for 50 cents a night, Norton filed for insolvency in August of 1856, and then he just vanished from the public eye. But not for long. On the 17th of September 1859, all of the local newspapers in San Francisco received a very strange letter. Most of them just dismissed the letter, probably after passing it around the office for a bit of a laugh. Except for one place. And so it was, the San Francisco Bulletin bore witness to Norton emerging from the woodwork with his first proclamation. At the peremptory request and desire of a large majority of the citizens of these United States, I, Joshua Norton, formerly of Algoa Bay, Cape of Good Hope, and now for the last 9 years and 10 months past of San Francisco, California, declare and proclaim myself Emperor of these United States, and, in virtue of the authority thereby in me vested, do hereby order and direct the representatives of the different states of the Union to assemble in Musical Hall of this city on the 1st day of February next, then and there to make such alterations in the existing laws of the Union as may ameliorate the evils under which this country is labouring, and thereby cause confidence to exist, both at home and abroad, in our stability and integrity. In true English tradition, Norton had settled down in a distant land and decided, you know what, this is mine now. But Norton wasn't just making America great again. He was claiming the United States for himself as emperor. He declared himself the Emperor of the United States. And you might think that sounds a little bit ridiculous. How could some random nobody just show up and reorganise the American Republic into the American Empire? Well, if you need to ask that, then clearly you haven't been paying attention for the last 100 years. But Norton insisted that he wasn't a nobody, and he sought to legitimise his claim by right of lineage. He claimed to be French royalty, having come from a family that fled the lemonade merchants. Norton said that his parents gave him the Jewish name of Joshua to protect him from assassins and Seth Rogen. It's Unclear whether Norton was just doing a bit and having a laugh to pass the time, or if the implosion of his wealth had genuinely caused him to have a complete mental breakdown and he actually believed he was America's emperor. But either way, if it was a bit, the man was committed. He immediately got to work in issuing proclamations throughout the newspapers, and he was quick to consolidate his power by abolishing Congress a month after his accession, saying, "It is represented to us that the universal suffrage, as now existing through the Union, is abused, that fraud and corruption prevent a fair and proper expression of the public voice, that open violation of the laws are constantly occurring, caused by mobs, parties, factions, and undue influence of political sects, that the citizen has not that protection of person and property which he is entitled to by paying his pro rata of the expense of government. In consequence of which, we do hereby abolish Congress, and it is therefore abolished." These are not the ramblings of a madman, all of that is just factually correct. Norton then ordered the US Army to carry out his will by deposing Congress and taking Washington DC. His orders, sadly, went unheeded, which is weird because the army actually swore to defend the American people against threats both foreign and domestic. However, I doubt they would have gotten far anyway. The FBI hadn't been founded yet, so there was no one to hold the doors open for them. On the 16th of July 1860, Norton saw that the woke elites were rewriting Dixieland for a modern audience because he saw tensions were starting to flare up between the North and the South. So Norton decided to take this a step further. He dissolved the Union altogether. He abolished the United States. I suppose a nation can't be divided by a boogaloo if there is no nation. But, eager to restore peace to his realm and spare his men the senseless bloodshed that they were inflicting upon each other, Norton also offered his services as a mediator between the North and South during the Civil War. Imagine Robert E. Lee and Lincoln sitting in a room getting yelled at by some crazy homeless guy. Unfortunately, Norton's offer was ignored, and the Western genre ended up getting some great inspiration. But this insubordination wasn't actually as common as you would think. Most people in San Francisco actually just went along with what Norton was doing, and they were kind enough to humour him since he wasn't hurting anyone, including the local newspapers that would print his many proclamations, which must have been helpful on slow news days. People essentially found Norton entertaining, and since he wasn't really doing any harm, people just had fun with it. Obviously, this goodwill wasn't universal, and Norton, like everyone else in the public eye, had a few hecklers, and he got memed on a bit. Like the caption on this image calling his bike a carriage of state. Norton was a bit of an easy target in that regard. Some pranksters actually sent him fake telegrams convincing him that he was to be engaged to Queen Victoria to strengthen the bond between the US and the British Empire. This ruse was actually so elaborate that Norton even received fake telegrams from the likes of Tsar Alexander of Russia and President Grant congratulating him on his upcoming nuptials. Sabotaging the local nutjob's love quest appears to be a centuries-old tradition because fake proclamations also appeared in newspapers, like one that said that the emperor was looking for love but didn't want to play favourites, hurt anyone's feelings or make anyone jealous, and that he was calling on all of the women everywhere to decide among themselves who got to marry him. While the occasional mild joshing was mostly it in terms of opposition to Norton's appointment, and most people were more than happy to deal with him in good faith, not everyone was so eager to accept Norton's authority. When he wanted to visit Sacramento while the legislature was in session, the steam navigation company refused to grant him passage. So Norton retaliated by ordering that the Sacramento River be blockaded until the company reconsidered. But while Norton's antics were mostly fun and games, playtime would soon be over. In 1861, war was on the horizon. It came to Norton's attention that Mexico was in desperate need of a protector in the wake of a French invasion, and someone jokingly suggested that it should be him. Norton didn't hesitate to step in, and Mexican and American soldiers alike must have been hailing him as Imperator.
Imperator.
As he courageously stepped up to the task, ready to flex his full imperial might on the French invaders. In a stunning and brave act of solidarity with the Mexican people, Norton added Protector of Mexico to his title. Yeah, Norton didn't actually step in at all. He just did the ye olde equivalent of sticking a flag in his bio and calling it a day. And then he gave up. A few years later, Norton gave up on protecting Mexico and dropped the title, saying that it was, and I quote, impossible to protect such an unsettled nation. Not much has changed. After demonstrating his clear knack for foreign policy, Norton dipped his toes into diplomacy. Emperor Pedro II of Brazil came to visit Berkeley University, so Norton demanded an imperial meeting. Pedro, for some reason, actually fucking obliged and gave him half an hour for a good chat, emperor to emperor. Because, of course Pedro did. How could you say no to the Emperor of the United States and former Protector of Mexico? Norton certainly looked the part, dripped out as he was in his shabby blue uniform with gold epaulets that he claimed were given to him by Queen Victoria, but they were actually a gift from the US Army stationed at the nearby Presidio. But of course the look wasn't complete without the beaver hat that Norton decorated with a peacock feather, or the ceremonial sword and cane or umbrella that he was never seen without. Norton was a picture of dignity, and he carried himself in a very regal manner. He was a great conversationalist, and he never outstayed his welcome anywhere he visited. By all accounts, he was becoming genuinely accepted by those he ruled over. However, not even an emperor like Augustus could have a reign without any hiccups, and Norton was no exception. In 1867, he was the target of a coup. A newly appointed and overzealous deputy, who probably hadn't been on the job long enough to know who Norton was, arrested the emperor for vagrancy and tried to have him committed as a lunatic, forgetting that the people of San Francisco loved him because they went fucking apeshit. The outcry was instant and massive. People were fucking furious. How dare this man arrest their emperor on bullshit charges? This was democracy manifest. What was the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal? It was thanks to Emperor Norton and his cheap rice that there are succulent Chinese meals. Norton's official heralds quickly jumped to his defence in the only ever recorded case of journalistic integrity in history, with one newspaper editorial reading, in what can only be described as the most dastardly of errors, Joshua A. Norton was arrested today. He is being held on the ludicrous charge of lunacy. Known and loved by all true San Franciscans as Emperor Norton, this kindly monarch of Montgomery Street is less a lunatic than those who have engineered these trumped-up charges. As they will learn, His Majesty's loyal subjects are fully apprised of this outrage. A more succinct but equally scathing comment read, Norton was in his day a respectable merchant, and since he has worn the imperial purple, he has shed no blood, robbed nobody, and despoiled this country of no one, which is more than can be said of any of his fellows in that line. The backlash against Norton's arrest soon led to his release and a formal apology from the Chief of Police. In his great wisdom and mercy, Norton accepted the apology by pardoning the rookie that arrested him. And from that point onwards, the police actually saluted Norton as he passed them in the street. Such a reaction doesn't really occur when the local lolcow is merely tolerated or humoured. Norton was something else. He was genuinely loved by San Franciscans, and he had become a real pillar of the community. So much so that his occupation was proudly listed in the city directory as Emperor. And with such recognition, you can bet that Norton was paid his due deference. Quite literally. Norton would very often collect taxes from local citizens, which were really just donations with extra whimsy. And while most people in his position, especially nowadays, would have milked this for all it was worth and ridden the imperial carriage all the way to the bank, Norton never gouged his subjects or took any more than he actually needed. Norton actually issued proclamations about his displeasure if taxes or water rates were too high, or if he found that the roads and streetcars weren't being maintained properly as he made his rounds around the city. Norton actually did his part in making sure that the imperial treasury was properly spent on the public services it was meant for. In return for the taxes that he collected, Norton also issued his own promissory notes called Imperial Treasury Bond Certificates, which the local printers sorted out for him as a favour. While they usually sold for $50 as a sort of curiosity or souvenir for tourists, they were actually honoured by numerous businesses as a sort of local currency. Now, I know what you're thinking, who would possibly take that? It's worthless, it's backed by absolutely nothing, but Norton saying, trust me bro. Yeah, well, so's all fucking money. And I'm much more inclined to believe the word of a random homeless man than the Federal Reserve. And it appears others are too, because one of Norton's bond certificates that has survived to this day is actually valued at $15,000 as a collector's item. Many others were also eager to offer tribute. After all, it was the least people could do for the emperor that had shepherded them into prosperity. A Pax Nortanica, if you will. The local masons, of which Norton was a member, gave him a small stipend to cover his room and board, and the city would replace his uniform as wear and tear demanded. But San Francisco did a lot more than just maintain the foundations of Maslow's pyramid for him. Being emperor came with a lot of perks. Norton regularly received free trolley car rides, theatres would always reserve seats for him in a place of honour no less, and restaurants always invited him as a guest of the owners and fed him on the house. This might sound like a huge privilege, but believe it or not, the honour was all Norton's. Restaurants actually competed for his patronage because if Norton was in the house, it attracted a lot more customers. Norton was so well liked that he actually had businesses fighting each other over the opportunity to give him free stuff. In practice, Norton's rank was obviously honorary at best, but that didn't stop him from proving himself worthy of all that it brought him. Norton really put the work in as emperor, and he spent a lot of time doing his own sort of work as a public servant. He regularly walked around the city to inspect the state of things and attended pretty much every event on the political calendar, to the point where the California state legislature reserved a chair for him whenever he wanted to preside over proceedings. Also, when he wasn't out and about, Norton was a legislative powerhouse that issued many decrees throughout his reign. Yeah, none of them were actually enforced, but these proclamations were a lot more than just goofy, whimsical nonsense for the funny pages. Norton spoke out about a wide variety of topics and made sure that he was well informed. He always kept himself abreast of local affairs by extensively reading all of the newspapers, regularly attending lectures and debates, and making ample use of libraries to inform his proclamations, which were considered way ahead of the curve when it came to civil rights. He advocated for the desegregation of schools and streetcars and fair treatment for Native Americans and Chinese immigrants. He even stopped a mob that was heading towards Chinatown by dropping to his knees and reciting the Lord's Prayer, which led to everyone going home ashamed. Norton also spoke out against government corruption, religious discrimination, and he even supported gender equality and women's suffrage. Kind of. Norton once attended a lecture from a leader of the women's rights movement, and as was customary, Norton was introduced on stage. As the story goes, Norton then took the opportunity to do the lecture himself and tell the women in the audience to go home and mind their children. Yeah, you can have the vote, but you lazy bitches have still got a job to do. Things did kind of go to shit when women got the vote though, didn't it? But it wasn't just the public sector that caught Norton's watchful eye. He also regularly called out scummy business practices, and he made his displeasure very well known whenever he thought that his people were being ripped off. In fact, no issue was too small, and he even spoke out on behalf of individuals who were having a hard time. Like this one woman who seemed to be harassed by local hide-and-seek players, who Norton told to stop under penalty of our sovereign displeasure. You can't win them all though, and unfortunately Norton's record on free speech isn't perfect because he banned a nickname for people from San Francisco in the following proclamation. Whoever, after due and proper warning, shall be heard to utter the abominable word Frisco, which has no linguistic or other warrant, shall be deemed guilty of a high misdemeanour and shall pay into the imperial treasury as penalty the sum of $25. But even something like that just highlights the most important thing that made Norton popular beyond the eccentricity that he brought to the city. He was just a really, really nice guy. So nice that everyone gave him the benefit of the doubt when he smashed a shop window that had a cartoon in it that made fun of him. I already mentioned that Norton was really personable and intelligent and made great conversation, but the fact that he didn't settle for just being the local goofball and used the attention to be a real public advocate speaks volumes to his character. My favourite thing that he would do that really exemplified his endearing Paddington-esque quality was bestowing the title of King for a Day on anyone, usually to kids who, as you would expect, were big fans of his. Or to other people who did something nice for him, or people who just seemed a little bit down and could do with some cheering up. And if that's not enough to sway you to Norton's side, well, money talks. And the money was on Norton's side because he was really good for businesses as a sort of local mascot and tourist attraction. Shops sold dolls in Norton's likeness, people would buy photos of him, restaurants that hosted him actually posted his official imperial seal in the same way that many brands do in this country. His presence at the theatre actually boosted ticket sales, and the free trolley car rides gave tourists ample opportunity to meet the Emperor. The trolley rides were actually great for boosting his track record of representing his constituents and boosting the economy, which was so good that it's no wonder that Norton abolished both political parties on the 12th of August 1869. I mean, he was doing a better job than both of them anyway. Despite his glowing success as Emperor, Norton couldn't do it alone. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. So, it's no wonder that Norton had an imperial entourage to help him carry the burden of ruling San Francisco. A pair of stray mongrel dogs named Lazarus and Bummer. That's a rather unfortunate name, actually, for San Francisco. Maybe not. The two dogs were local celebrities in their own right, having been inseparably close friends since Bummer saved Lazarus from an attack by a much bigger dog, and also brought him food as he recovered. Over time, the two made a career of catching rats for local merchants in return for food, and they were so successful that they garnered quite a reputation. Also, they were dogs. Who doesn't love dogs? Being the lovable misfits that they were, it's no wonder that Bummer and Lazarus's legend got tangled up with Norton's, because they had become just as famous and respected as the Emperor. And those in high places tend to stick together. And just so you know, that picture is actually the cartoon that got the window smashed. Accounts of the adventures of Bummer and Lazarus are often largely exaggerated, but as the stories go, they went everywhere with Norton, and the two dogs reportedly even had theatre seats reserved alongside the Emperor, to whom they were very loyal companions and very, very good boys. Norton, however, didn't actually own the dogs. They were very much their own dogs, but they had a good relationship with pretty much everyone. So much so that when a law was passed requiring dog catchers to round up all unmuzzled dogs and put down those that were unclaimed, a merchant actually claimed Lazarus after he was captured. The pair were so crucial to the merchant's rat-catching efforts, with reports that they once killed 400 rats in one go, that the merchants lobbied the Board of Supervisors to actually exempt these two brave dogs from the dog catcher's wrath. In October of 1863, the news that Lazarus had died after eating food laced with poison was met with widespread mourning. An artist created a depiction of a funeral attended by notable historical residents of San Francisco, with Norton naturally presiding over the proceedings. Sadly, Bummer was killed by a drunk just a couple of years later, and he received an equally profound send-off as Lazarus. Years later, the pair were memorialised with a plaque telling their story, which summed up their friendship like this. Two dogs with but a single bark, two tails that wagged as one. Terrible day for Rain. Despite the loss of his animal best friends, Norton continued to carry out his duties, and in the early 1870s, he adopted something of a passion project. You see, the area was very divided, and Norton wanted to bring communities together. He decided to take it upon himself to bridge the gap in San Franciscan society. Literally. On the 23rd of March 1872, Norton issued a proclamation outlining his grand vision, the first ever proposal to build a suspension bridge connecting Oakland and San Francisco via Terra Buena, which, unlike most of his decrees, actually garnered a lot of support from both locals and politicians. Later on the 21st of September, Norton ordered a survey to determine whether a bridge or a railway tunnel would be the best option. At some point in the whole affair, he also ordered the arrest of the Board of Supervisors for ignoring his decrees. Ultimately, however, Norton never got his grand imperial construction underway because the bay was too wide and deep for the engineers to make it work. So, unfortunately, he never got to see his grand vision realised. But, sadly, on the 8th of January 1880, Norton had a stroke and collapsed on his way to a monthly debate at the California Academy of Sciences. And before any medical help could arrive, his 21-year reign came to an end. All through his reign, there were rumours that Norton had a secret hoard of wealth, but it turned out that his coffers looked much more like Claudius's than Caligula's, because Norton had very little on his person when he died, and the search of his room in the boarding house didn't yield much either. Just a small collection of canes and hats, an 1828 French franc, and a fake telegram from Queen Victoria. This financial situation meant that initially it seemed like Norton was going to be buried in a pauper's coffin. But fortunately, pretty much everyone agreed that such a burial was in no way fit for the Emperor. Despite the humble lifestyle and appearance of poverty, Norton was arguably richer than any other man alive, because he had something that you can never put a price tag on. The love of his people. Bit gay, but it's true. After all he had done for them, San Francisco all came together to repay Norton for his service. Businesses actually closed and flags flew at half-mast out of respect for the Emperor. On the 10th of January, Norton received a grand funeral funded by the city's wealthier citizens, with the Pacific Club splashing out on a rosewood casket that carried him on his last journey to the Masonic cemetery. at the head of a 2-mile procession of 10 to 20,000 mourners that all came out to say goodbye. During the mourning period, one newspaper said, "San Francisco without Emperor Norton will be like a throne without a king." And it appears that the city never lost its love for its emperor, because in 1934, Norton was transferred to Woodlawn Cemetery in Colma, with thousands of people attending his reinterment, with flags once again flying at half-mast. In fact, it seemed like Norton has continued to be the gift that keeps on giving, even after all these years, because half a century after he died, one of his proclamations was finally carried out. In 1933, the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge was finally started, right where Norton had suggested it should be built. He even got the credit he deserved for its conception, with a plaque honouring him that reads, "Pause, traveller, and be grateful to Norton I, Emperor of the United States, Protector of Mexico, 1859 to 1880, whose prophetic wisdom conceived and decreed the bridging of San Francisco Bay." However, this isn't enough for some people, and there is also a petition to actually fully rename the bridge after Norton. But wait, there's more. The tunnel that he also suggested, which is now known as the Trans-Bay Tube, also came to fruition and opened in September of 1974. The bridge and tunnels are just a couple of the many ways that Norton's legacy has been kept alive. Like the great emperors of old, Norton was deified in a way by being named as a saint in the Discordian religion. And he's also appeared in literature. Mark Twain based the character of the King in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn on Emperor Norton, and the man himself appeared in The Wrecker by Robert Louis Stevenson. Unfortunately, just like most childless emperors, Norton left behind no plans regarding his succession. So, the imperial line, and therefore the office itself, died with him. And without an emperor to keep things running smoothly, San Francisco literally transformed into the biggest shit stain in the history of cities on Earth. I mean, Jesus Christ, the place is an absolute shit pile now. Like, literally and figuratively, it is just an absolute den of shit. It's a horrible, awful place. I mean, I don't know, maybe democracy just wasn't the best idea after all. I mean, if an entire state legislature achieves just about as much as a goofy guy with a funny hat, then maybe we should go for the goofy guy with the funny hat. Emperor Norton, in my opinion, wasn't really a crazy ranting homeless guy. That was clearly just a character he was playing. I think he was actually very smart and very intelligent. He clearly started this whole LARP as just a bit of a laugh, but when people started enjoying it and going along with it and it became very entertaining for everyone, he just started leaning into it. And as a result, he actually achieved a lot of good by using his large platform to point a finger towards the state's chicanery while helping a lot of people of San Francisco along the way. He created a character for entertainment purposes, but was actually able to do a lot of good alongside that. Norton was a gentleman and a scholar. He actually listened to his subjects, he didn't fleece his people for all they were worth, he was a really, really nice guy, and he made everyone's day that little bit brighter. And that's all that anyone could ever want in a ruler. Thank you for your service.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody should subscribe.